Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss how farmers have started complaining again that they are unable to get the staff they need to pick crops, get them packed and distributed to the shops. Last year it was the pandemic. This year we have Brexit to provide a permanent barrier to getting the staff needed. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I actually must start off with this. You may recall me mentioning that Boris Johnson and his cabinet of clowns have given up trying to identify any actual benefits of Brexit and are advertising for someone to do the job for them with a salary of £120,000. Well, Emily Thornberry's Labour's shadow minister, she's for international trade, Liz Truss's opposite number basically. She spotted that the government is also going to shell out another £43,000 of our money to pay a recruitment firm to actually find suitable candidates for the role. I mean, you might think that's a lot of money to find candidates for a role. Indeed, a lot of people have commented as such. But to be fair, it is not unlike trying to recruit a unicorn hunter. Also, if you look at the form here, it says published 5th of July, but deadline 4th of June of this year as well. Not really sure what that's about. But while we wait a few more years for the government to find an elusive Brexit benefit, let's crack on with more Brexit disasters. And it's farming again. It's going to be farming quite a lot. Given our new status as a third country in Europe, with the highest trade barriers on the entire continent, oh, truly world beating, you'd have thought we'd be a bit conscious of just how reliant we are on imports for things like food. Talk from Brexiteers in the past couple of years was all about increasing our producing capacity. Fair enough, yeah, absolutely. Something as important as that, if we're going to make it more difficult to import it, absolutely we're going to need to produce more of our own, though it's not physically possible to provide entirely for ourselves. At least not unless Soylent Green comes into the equation. I suppose if it did, with these Conservatives in charge, there'd be no shortage of supply. But although our food standards are all set to be dropped now, I don't in all honesty believe that they will have dropped quite that far just yet. So we face a simple problem. We are reliant upon imports for about half of our food and are enacting policies that make trade with our main market more difficult. Some other markets as well, but Europe is more important. We can ease the problem by increasing food production in Britain, sure, but we're actually doing the opposite. Last year, pandemic travel restrictions made it more difficult to get the migrant labour that farms rely upon to get crops picked. It wasn't impossible. They were able to get some. Some farmers just paid more or paid to have them jetted in from Europe, but the industry as a whole really struggled. We had crops rotting in the fields. We were told by the gammons that these migrant crop prickers were stealing jobs from the British unemployed. Well, you can imagine my relief when they said that. Thank goodness, I thought. We can reduce the level of unemployment and still get the crops picked after all. Yay for Brexit and all that. Oh, but hang on a minute. The farmers were still complaining of crops going unpicked. That doesn't make sense. Where was this legion of British workers to pick the veg? Turns out the gammons were talking crap. And now we have the same problem again this year. Travel restrictions, not what they were last year. That's less of an issue. It's not a non-issue. I know we are still a plague island, but Brexit has landed now. And it's not just the people who pick the crops. There's an article in the Times pointing out that staff in processing are also down. There was a particularly tragic event reported where a farmer had to tell their staff who'd picked courgettes, I think it was, to toss the crops back into the field. They'd been picked. Someone had picked them. But they couldn't be packed due to a staff shortage at that end. So they just had to be chucked. And then we also know there are shortages on the delivery side of things as well. I mentioned recently how Tesco said they were wasting nearly 50 tonnes of food a week, or their suppliers were, because they couldn't get it distributed. And when it comes to all of these areas, there are multiple pressures on staffing, of course. You know, people will point out it's physically very, very hard work for not really enough pay. Frankly, I mean, it can be a pittance. You know, it's not always minimum wage. It's also long hours. The farmer in this Times article said so that his workers did 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. for £11 an hour, or an average of £11 an hour, because it's dependent on productivity. It's not a set amount. You get more if you pick more. He said he's not legally allowed to increase their hours to compensate for the workers he couldn't get. I mean, thank goodness, that's 60 hours in the field. Thank goodness. It's not like 60 hours a week at a computer, constantly bending your back and legs every which way, picking crops out of a field. I cannot even imagine doing that for weeks on end for any amount of money, much less about a tenner an hour. I imagine the processing plant is less physical, but it's still manual labour for long hours and not necessarily great pay. Then lorry drivers, which is not just physically tough, but requires skills that don't come overnight. And that pays poorly as well. I had someone say the pay was not bad. And I think it's way below minimum, the national average rather. It's way below. By definition, national average is maybe what you call not bad. Anything below it is bad. Anything way below it is definitely bad. Average age of lorry drivers in the UK is reported to be 55. Now, these were already problems. Hard, thankless work, not great pay. You already had the conditions to risk staff shortages. But we've only just had sudden shortages. The hard work, long hours, not great pay, they've been in all three of those jobs for years. So what's happened recently? Has there suddenly been an explosion in the number of jobs going? Because that would explain it as well. If these lorry drivers could suddenly get much easier work for the same or better pay, absolutely that would explain it. If there were suddenly way more jobs on the market. There's not. It's fewer jobs. We've only just had problems with getting staff now, or at least serious enough problems that they have attracted national media attention. So it's only just very suddenly got up to this level of seriousness. In addition, although the same issues with lorry drivers at least are present in other European countries, that is ageing population of them because it's crap but skilled work for not enough pay, they don't seem to have the news reports of empty shelves in the supermarkets to the same extent. We had a story recently that there weren't enough lorry drivers to get some Haribo from Germany to the UK. No Haribo shortages in Germany itself. They're not struggling to transport it to their own shops, just us. Not the most serious example of a shortage, but illustrative of the fact that although the various pressures are everywhere in Europe, it's only Britain that has buckled like this under them. Someone was quoted in the article as saying that the problem with the government's immigration policy is that it views the harvest workers as low skilled and low paid. And you can see why. Low skilled doesn't mean literally that. It just means doesn't require a crap load of formal training. Any job has skills, and the more experienced you are, the more skilled you are, and the more productive you will be. Similarly, it's not a job that needs a wage above minimum wage. In reality, it will do to be able to attract the staff and to be able to motivate them to be more productive if you base it on productivity. The guy said, and I quote, "Though the government says harvest workers are low skilled and low paid, they're not. Many of them are highly skilled and come back year after year, and they are paid significantly more than the minimum wage. We've got people on this pilot program from the Ukraine who have never done this type of work. It takes them a long time to get up to speed." And that last bit tells a story in itself. So they can't get the productive workers from the EU that the industry has been used to. So they've had to go to poorer countries outside the EU, like Ukraine. Notice not a thing about being able to attract that shortage of workers from Britain. They tried that last year, it flopped badly. I gather, what was it now? Last year, 11% of that workforce were British, 11%. And that was in a year where there was a real drive to get more British workers in it and a real problem with getting foreign workers. 11% was all we could manage under those conditions. Because last year it was easier. People on furlough were allowed to carry out this work. It was all part of a national campaign to help us all get through the pandemic. And it's not that it didn't attract anyone, just nowhere near enough. I said at the time, this was just a test run for Brexit, and some of the people they did attract onto it wouldn't be able to do it in later years. At the time, we still had time to change immigration policy. We'd left the EU, too late to do anything about that. We knew we were going to get a crap deal, basically too late to do anything about that. But we'd exposed the fact that without that migrant labour, farming was buggered. More than that, access to our own food supplies was going to be made less secure. So even if you don't care about the farming industry, well, the products of the farming industry are fairly important. And it's really this simple. If we can't produce as much food as we did, then we will have to import more, or more people will starve. Had to observe a fatuous comment yesterday downplaying the shortages by saying nobody's actually starving. Because like I've said before in every video on this topic, those of us who can easily afford the grocery bill, not going to starve or go hungry or really do without to any great extent. We just have less choice. That's the thing. It's not like I go in there and I'm fighting over a can of tuna with someone else because it's all that's left. I can go in and fill a trolley with food, no problem at all. The shortages, the problem is for the millions of people in the UK in food poverty. Their access to food is unreliable. That means there are days when they go without. And it's a sliding scale. At the sharp end of that, you have people who are in actual fact starving. Problems with food supply increases that because it puts the cost up of things. The cheapest things are the ones that go. If this isn't dealt with, we're told that supplies of food cannot make it to school cafeterias after summer. What then? What about those who rely upon school meals to actually get food in their bellies? Do we need Marcus Rashford to come off the bench again? But there we are, more problems with our food supplies. You can see why the term perfect storm was being used a few months ago by those in the know. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.